without artificial intelligence, well, we could wonder the same about biodiversity as well, and achieving the standard of environmental stewardship that nature and society requires. We've got quite the conversation coming up for you now, sharing their story about fighting the climate crisis, thousands of trees at a time. Please welcome to the stage Maxime Lenormand, a geospatial data scientist, and storyteller Kate Creamer.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We're so excited to be here this afternoon. Like I said, my name is Kate Creamer.
I'm Maxime Lenormand, geospatial data scientist at Overstory.
And I'm a storyteller. I've been with the Overstory team for almost a year now, and I'm really excited to share with you today a story that Max and I have been working together with our team about how we solve a key business issue for utilities while also preventing key issues with the climate crisis. So the age-old question that we've heard time and time again, if a tree falls and there's no one around to hear it, does it actually make a sound? We may not know. But the question that Max and I are asking in our work with Overstory is, if a tree falls and there's no one around to hear it or see it, can it start a fire? The answer is, unfortunately, yes. So you all may have heard about California's Dixie Fire. This is a catastrophic fire. It happened in 2018. It's a massive fire, second biggest in California's history. It lit almost 1 million acres on fire. It destroyed more than 1,300 buildings, to say nothing of the human lives that were lost in the fire. It was a catastrophic disaster. And when experts look back to see what actually started this fire, the conclusion that they came to was it started when a tree came in contact with a single power line. It's a big issue, and this power line is owned by Pacific Gas and Electric in California. And utilities know that this is a problem. PG&E knows that this is a problem. This is a $30 billion industry annually, globally. The utilities are spending their operations and management budgets on vegetation management, and still, this tree was one of 8 million that were deemed within the fallen range around their power lines. So what they're doing is simply not enough. For a little bit of context, the 5 worst years for wildfires in the US have happened in the last 14 years. The planet is getting hotter. These wildfires are burning faster, out of control. And if nobody's around to see them happen, which is likely what happens along power lines when these fires are lit by trees just falling in, people aren't around, they can't see that it's happening, and they spread like wildfire. The world continues to get hotter, and what that means for trees along power corridors is that we're seeing severe droughts. And when we see severe droughts, we see that trees aren't as healthy, they can't survive these pest infestations, bark beetles take over, they kill these trees from the inside out, we see diseases take over, then all of a sudden you have this standing fuel that's literally just waiting for a spark. So we have these increased droughts, more pest infestations, more disease, less biodiversity as a result of these burning fires. We have more people near the trees, which is a result of people just moving out into the wildland-urban interface. And then on top of that, we're all talking about this decarbonized future. So we want more dependence on electricity, and yet our electricity is what's setting the world on fire. It's a catastrophic problem. And it might seem like electric utility-caused fires are just kind of an edge case, but they're not. Fires caused by electricity, and power lines specifically, are 17 times more likely to become catastrophic than other types. So when we have a look at this massive problem that's only going to get worse, and we see where we can maybe make a difference, we're trying to solve a pretty simple problem. That's keep trees from falling on power lines. Simple, right?
It should be simple. We're going to unpack that a little bit more. The problem we're trying to solve is doing that at a really large scale. So the way it's done today, it's not like the utility companies don't know this is a problem. So the way it's done is it's sending people on the ground. Talk about boots on the ground. It's also sending drones and helicopters. The problem with that is that every time we want to analyze a new area or analyze an area again that we've gone to before, there's a pretty linear cost to sending people, sending another helicopter. So again, one of the problems is doing that at scale. We're not just interested in doing that for one line. We're interested in doing that for pretty much all the grid. And we need that to scale to a state, to a country. For something like the United States, it becomes a huge area to monitor. So sending another helicopter doesn't necessarily scale as much as we'd like to. So this is why at Overstory, we're turning to satellite images. There's many benefits to using satellites. First of all, it's not dependent on how remote an area is to get a new image. We don't need it to be easily accessible. It doesn't matter what borders we're looking at. We can look pretty much everywhere. On top of that, satellite sensors are calibrated. They're perfect for machine learning because we can know what the images are going to look like. Here you can see deforestation monitoring. This is great because we can also see in places that are hard to access. Not only that, but over the past decade, we've seen a massive increase in the number of satellites that are sent to space, a lot of which are looking down on Earth for Earth observation applications. That's mostly due to a decrease in the cost of sending payloads to space, which means now is a perfect time. We've never had as much data as today. And that's, again, over just the past decade. So we get satellite images. We can look down. Okay, we have an image. We know how to work with that when we're using machine learning. We're looking for trees. We can relatively easily make a segmentation model that tells us, okay, the trees are here. That's a good start. But if we take a closer look, the great thing with satellite images is that it's not just red, green, blue bands. We have additional information, so things like infrared that allow us to get a little bit more information about the vegetation. So here we can see species. We can also differentiate the health of different trees. That's what we're doing at Overstory. We're taking all of that and we're assessing a risk to different areas of the vegetation. We're not just saying, there's a tree here, there's no trees there. On top of that, we are working with those utility companies because they know where their network is. So we're aggregating that together with the vegetation intelligence that we're building. And here's a look at the product that we've been building. We're trying to really simplify that problem for those utilities. They care about their network, and we just made this simple color coding, which is quite obviously red is the area where, they want to focus on, and the lighter colors are areas where they don't need to focus on as much. So we've been talking about this a little bit as if it was just a simple overview, a 2D problem. But a lot of the places that we're working with, they are hard to access because of mountains, because of hills, because of a lot of other things. So we started realizing that there was going to be a lot of parameters, a lot of things to take into account if we really wanted to provide a good analysis about the state of vegetation. So we started asking ourselves, okay, what matters? What do we need to be able to tell these utility companies about? And the short answer is everything matters. Of course, there's a bit more nuance. Different aspects impact different utilities differently, but what we noticed is that all of them really cared about this depth of analysis. So if we could just go through some of those images from left to right and top to bottom, there's different health of trees. You can see in the image there, some trees look dead, some look really healthy. But we also realized that just because we see a tree near a line doesn't mean it's high enough to touch that line. So now we need to think about height. And then different species grows at different speeds. So this tree might not be a problem today, but tomorrow this species grows so fast that in a year or so it might become a problem. There's different wildfire risk in different areas. We also realized that the distance, it's pretty obvious, but how far a tree is from the line definitely impacts how risky it is. And I was just talking about the terrain, the elevation. All of these things are things that we need to take into account and to give something pretty simple down for the utilities to be able to do something. So we showed a simple version of our product earlier. Here's a little bit more of an in-depth, more localized for a few spans. That's the word that we're using to talk about a line between two poles. what it looks like. So we can tell them, okay, the vegetation is here, this vegetation is close to the line, so it's more risky. That allows to get a little bit more localized, understand what the problem is, and they can understand then if they need to send someone or not. I want to take a moment to really hone in on the problem of scale. That's why we're using satellite imagery and then machine learning. According to certain estimates, there's about 3 trillion trees in the world. So we're doing vegetation analysis. Vegetation is kind of an all-encompassing word, but what we care about is down to the individual tree, because at the end of the day, that's what's falling on the line. So to go a little bit on the technical side, for those of you who are interested, a lot of the tools for machine learning, but also for satellite imagery processing are around Python. They resolve around that. We have to do a lot of exploration of data. I was talking about how satellite images is not just red, green, blue. There's infrared, but there's also different types of satellite imageries like radar, like hyperspectral. All of these are new, and they're coming up more and more. So we're doing a lot of data exploration. So that's where Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Notebooks come into account. Python is also pretty known for being single-threaded, but we have a scale problem. We need our pipelines to really scale. That's where we're exploring options like Dask that help us multi-thread a lot of the things that we're doing. And again, these tools are pretty new. On top of that, we mentioned that there's different layers that we need to talk about: the height, the species, the health. So we have multiple things that we need to put in production that don't necessarily always overlap. So we're looking into tools like Dagster, which help us put different elements in production to be able to deliver our analysis at different moments.
And one of the things that I find particularly interesting about the way our tech team works is that because we're such a diverse team, and we're a pretty small team with different diverse experience, we're not going to have that utility expertise that these folks who have been walking the lines and who have been involved in utilities for years and years and years have. And so one of my favorite parts of our job is that we get to talk to our customers and we figure out what problems matter to them. So you saw a slide earlier where Max presented. It says, what matters? Everything, but differently for everyone. And one of the cool parts of my job is getting to talk to our utility customers and saying, okay, what species matter to you? And in Colorado, that may be aspens or Siberian elm or cottonwood, because they grow at different rates. And so they may be able to provide us some of the data on their side. And then being able to give that back to the data team and say, okay, what do we do with that? What does that look like, Max?
Oh, I'm sorry.
How does it look when we bring data back into our pipeline?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we have to do, and one of the cool things is that a lot of things that we've shown here, we didn't necessarily know about them coming in. We just thought, okay, satellite imagery, we can see trees, problem solved, right? They can just figure it out. But all these things about, okay, oh, the species actually matters because this tree grows a lot faster than this one. So sometimes we came with analysis about like, look, all the trees, and they're like, great, but that one's not gonna move. We care about this one here. So there's a lot of learning that we've done just working with people who understand our customers more than a lot of the engineers that we are working with could, because we're just working on building these scalable problems. So we really need both of those components to work together to actually make a difference.
And because we recognize as a team that we're only going to be successful in solving this massive, important problem if we start asking massive, important questions. We're a team of people with super diverse experience. I think I mentioned that earlier, but to highlight it, we have a wildland firefighter on our team. We have an arborist. A few of us have come from Spotify and Intercom and Meetup and the New York Times. And we all started working on this problem together because we think it's a problem worth solving. And one of the best parts about it is that not only is it a problem worth solving from an environmental perspective, but obviously it's something that utilities dearly need a solution for. So, in the end, to bring it back to the initial question that I asked, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Yes, we think it does, but hopefully, with the help of satellites and machine learning, it won't start a fire. Thank you.
Okay, Great, Max. Thank you both very much. Please stay on the stage because we want to open up to the floor. Some questions, if we have them, please raise your hands high in the air. If you have a question for this pair, and we will get them answered. We have one over there and one front row here. So the microphone's coming to you now. We'll just take the one on the far left first, and then we'll come to you, madam. We'll just take this one first. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the great talk. I was just wondering, you said that wildfires caused by power lines are 17 times more likely to cause a catastrophic fire, but I just read that fires are 33 times more likely to be caused by something else to begin with. So I was just wondering, does Overstory also plan to address other causes of wildfires?
Excellent question. The different causes of wildfires can be anything from like small electrical fires. The firefighter on our team actually is really, really passionate about, he doesn't like talking about the number of fires caused in a year because a wildfire can technically be considered like somebody's car sparked a piece of grass on the side of the road and it burned for 2 or 3 minutes, and then just fizzled out. And so we don't actually really look at the number of wildfires. We're looking at things like IPCC reports that are showing us where we can make the biggest difference for the biggest fires that are hardest to manage.
Great, I think that answers your question. We'll now head to the question on the front row from this lady, please.
Hello, thank you. Great talk, really fascinating work. I was wondering if you could go a little bit into detail on the architecture of your, or one or many of your models, because you have different modalities, different data types. I just would like to know what you are doing in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. So one of the main challenges is that there's a lot of pre-trained models that exist out there, and a lot of those are built for JPEG images, for example. So you expect 3 bands, red, green, blue, and 8-bit data. And a lot of the research is working on that. But one of the challenges is how do we take that for what's more scientific data? I think in the medical field, there's some of those problems as well, where the data is a little bit more complex. With satellite imagery, sometimes we have like 20 bands. So we have red, green, blue, infrared, near infrared, things like that. So one of the challenges that we have is trying to either simplify the data that we have, the complex data that we have to fit into pre-trained models, or try something new that fits the data that we have, the complexity of the data that we have, because we don't necessarily want to throw away some of the data that could be useful. So on the architecture, it's a lot of playing around, actually. That's why we talked about Jupyter Notebooks, because there is a lot of that exploration, even if we're trying to take things off the shelf.
Wonderful, getting nods to that. That question was fully answered. Do we have any more questions in the audience? We have a hand raised in the center aisle here. If we could get a microphone to this gentleman. Just looking around for more hands. Thank you, sir.
Hi, great presentation. Question about how you iterate on your models when you get new data from production, because you showed some figures about new recent wildfires, so probably a lot of new data for you guys to come train your models on. Wondering how you approach that feedback loop.
So we don't work necessarily on the wildfire itself. If there's a wildfire, we're coming in way too late. So we're really trying to work on the risk that there is. So the iteration process we have is we'll say an area is risky or not, and the customer comes back and say, like, why do you think this area is risky? And sometimes they send someone in the field, they send us a picture of, okay, this is the tree that we think is problematic. And so we're fine-tuning with the feedback of these people. These people they know their territory better than we can in specific areas. So we're taking that feedback in and trying to tune the models that we have, more than, oh, this place a wildfire started, what went wrong? Because by then it's way too late for us to come in.
Lovely. I did see a hand right at the back there. If we could get a microphone. If you just wave your hand a bit so our microphone people can see you. Oh, yes, sir. You take this one, and then we will come to you at the back. Thank you.
A great presentation. Thank you. So I was wondering, with all the data you have, besides looking at it from the tree falling and causing the damage, are you able to integrate other class of data, weather patterns? Obviously the tree is green, maybe during the summer, but you don't see that tree in green, when it's winter. So being able to integrate other information about the weather pattern, humidity has a huge factor, the wind and so forth. Because I think the combination of those, when it's integrated with what you're doing, then it really solves a big problem and gives a bigger impact.
Exactly, that's a really good question. You could make the case that a lot of these weather measurements are also done by satellites. So we are focused on just the optical imagery, if we want, like a camera in the sky. But you're totally right. There are things like wind, like weather patterns. A lot of our customers are in the US where there's storm seasons. Like we're tinkering around with trying to integrate a lot of these things. But not just that, we also work with aerial imagery. LiDAR, for example, which is not an image directly, it's more of a point cloud. We're really trying to provide vegetation intelligence. It just so happens that the problem we have right now is at scale, and satellite imagery is the solution that we have today. But we're totally open to trying to integrate as much as we can if that gives us a better understanding of the vegetation.
Very comprehensive answer. Our final question from the back of the room.
Lovely talk, and congratulations on the great work. I'm interested in one point that you touched upon, which is the time frames and how does it actually work in a production setting. So you train your model, and then do you have like a flow of data that comes from satellite images? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, the nice thing about trees is that they don't tend to move too much. So we don't have a very quick need, like we don't need to deliver our analysis in a really timely manner. And so some of our analysis, sometimes we can take a lot more time. So we're talking days, weeks, to be able to fine-tune something to understand an area better. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but we don't necessarily have that same time constraint that other more time-sensitive applications might have. And also, we're working with so much data that allows us to iterate a little bit as we run it. So the production is more about the scale rather than time to deliver.
We are going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you, Max and Kate.
Thank you very much.
Now, a bit of a change of tack. We've talked a little bit about play and leisure.